It don't work like that. But I definitely get why you would see it that way. The last 2 decades of our lives together, you've been having it your way. For the last 2 decades, you've treated our life together like Burger King. But once I signed those papers, I was done letting you have it your way. I gave you everything you asked for. What more do you want? This is Bedtime Stories, Grownup Edition, Irreconcilable Differences, Part 3. When Regina drug herself back to her hotel room, she was exhausted. She'd been in meetings all day long with Natalia, and the two of them had been in meetings all day long handling business for St. Montclair, the incarcerated second son of Nigel St. James, who was the deceased kingpin of the St. James organization. Saint was in federal custody in Arkansas, suspected of unaliving someone several years before, and he'd given his girlfriend, Natalia Jimenez, responsibility for all of his financials and power of attorney over all of his business dealings. Saint was living a double life. He was not only a finisher for the St. James family, but he was also using his multi-state real estate company to support the community of people who were trying to rebuild their lives after incarceration. When Regina was offered the job as Natalia's business attorney, she hadn't hesitated to take it, because it meant she could leave the family complex in Denton, Texas, where she lived with her husband, her 3 children, and her mother. She missed her children desperately, but her husband LJ and her best friend Angela could both go to hell, and she was so committed to that position that she served her husband with divorce papers just days earlier. She was convinced that 15 and a half years earlier, her husband and her best friend had gotten freaky, and had she not ear hustled on their conversation when she was bringing him lunch while he was recovering from a gunshot wound, she would have had no reason to suspect that anything had occurred during a period of time when he was recovering from another gunshot wound, a wound that forced him to retire from the police department in North Carolina. His most recent injury was the result of him serving as Angela's right-hand man. She decided to insert herself in Five Family business, representing her father's family, the Lopez organization. And while she had no plans of involving herself in criminal activity, and LJ had done quite a few things Regina thought they'd never do. So Regina concluded that it was not far-fetched that the two may have done other things that they said they would never do. Their friendships spanned decades. They'd met when they were in the 2nd grade. Angela and LJ were already friends. Regina was the new kid on the block. Angela embraced her, and eventually LJ did too. And they'd remained friends through elementary, middle, high school, and college. During college, LJ and Angela had given a romantic relationship a go. Things didn't work out. Angela found someone else, and she encouraged LJ and Regina to give a romantic relationship a try. While Angela and Marcus stayed together, eventually getting married. Their union ended tragically, while Regina and LJ's had survived Regina's kidnapping and LJ's 2 bouts with prostate cancer. He wasn't just in remission, he'd been cured. It had cost over $1 million. And Angela's uncle, Emmanuel Lopez, the kingpin of the Lopez organization, had gladly paid it to show his appreciation for all of the years that LJ had kept Angela safe and kept the secret that she was a part of the Lopez family from her and everybody else. Manny had shipped him and his family to Europe, where he'd received an experimental treatment only available overseas. With a brand new lease on life, both LJ, Regina, Angela, and her new husband, Q, believed that the hardest times were behind them all. But while Regina and LJ had been together for years, Regina had always been suspicious of her husband. She was always accusing that man of cheating. And no matter how many times he proved her wrong, she didn't stop. Regina had gone to great lengths to discover what the secret was that her husband and best friend were hiding. She even got her 12-year-old son, L3, to give her one of the surveillance devices that he developed and bugged the room where her husband was recovering so that she could monitor his conversations. When her husband confronted her because he'd found that device, she'd asked him flat out if he'd slept with Angela. And instead of saying yes or no, he refused to answer. And when she confronted Angela, she refused to answer as well. Both of them were under the impression that she should just trust them because she knew them since they were all 8 years old. But she was of the mind that if they were innocent, they would be willing to prove it. And the only reason why they were refusing to do so was because they were guilty. Everybody who knew about the ongoing drama had tried to convince her to just let it go. They tried to remind her of Angela's character, of all the times she'd been wrong in the past, of all of the things that she and her husband had survived, of how good of a husband she had. And all of their admonitions fell on deaf ears because she was determined to find out the truth. So much so that she'd even called Angela's husband Q and told him what she suspected. Q and LJ had become friends while they were in college. They were also fraternity brothers, and they'd been partners at the police department in North Carolina. Despite Angela, LJ, and Regina's closeness, Q hadn't met Angela until after LJ had been shot and they both were no longer working at the North Carolina Police Department. They hadn't really had an opportunity to get to know one another well until Q was working at LJ's PI firm in North Carolina, and the PI firm was responsible for investigating Angela's then husband, Marcus. You'd have to go back quite a few seasons to get all of that backstory, but baby, it was a doozy. When the case concluded, Angela's husband, Marcus, was dead. So was her older sister, Jessica, and Angela became a mother of two, taking in her husband, Marcus, and her sister, Jessica's daughter, Melissa, and giving birth under duress to her and her husband, Marcus's only son, Angel. Eventually, Angela and Q found love. She and her small family moved to Dallas, and so did Regina and LJ. So, in order to get to the bikini bottom of things, Regina figured that she'd up the stakes. She'd confront Q with what she knew and what she suspected. And since he didn't play about his wife, just like she didn't play about her husband, he would help her find out what the hell had went on. Imagine her surprise when he told her he didn't want to hear none of that. Not to call him anymore with that mess, not to call his wife anymore with that mess. And he talked to her in person. When she asked him when that would be, he told her he'd let her know. And when she got back to her hotel room, there was a surprise waiting for her. Inside her hotel suite, sitting in the office chair at the desk, was Q himself. How he'd gotten in, she had no clue and didn't have time to ask. As tired as she was ready to get down to business. And she just knew that he was too. So she said, "It's about time that you made time to handle this ongoing issue we are having with our marriages." Q said, "I ain't having no issue with my marriage. At least not based on what you got going on. You need to let this go, Gigi." Regina said, "I know damn well you didn't come all the way to Maryland to tell me to let this go. You could have stayed in Puerto Rico." Q had been in Puerto Rico handling the ongoing war between the Notorious Five Families and an international trafficking organization. And he said, "I've been back from Puerto Rico for a few days. I took time away from my family because I thought that it was important that you and I have this conversation. Why are you doing this?" Regina said, "I told you why. My husband and your wife slept together. I know it in my spirit. There's no other reasonable explanation for why they wouldn't answer the question when I asked them. And as pissed off as I am, I don't want him hurt, though. I'm sure you've got to be pissed, knowing that that man let you marry Angela without telling you that he'd taken her down. Because I'm beyond pissed that he married me, knowing that he had." Q said, "LJ is not in danger of me doing anything to him over anything that may or may not have happened damn near 20 years ago." Regina said it was 15 and a half years ago, to be exact. "And no matter how long ago, I wouldn't have married him if I knew about it. I wouldn't have been friends with her all these years if I knew about it. Are you telling me that you would have married her?" You cut her off saying, "I know everything that I needed to know before I made her my wife." Regina asked, "And you haven't asked him about it?" Q said, "I'm not interested in going back down memory lane. I love Angela, and I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that she loves me. Anything and everything she may have done before me is old news and inconsequential." Regina said, "Fine, but anything that she may have done with LJ before he and I got married was still done behind my damn back. You ain't had to come all this way to say that. So you can see your way out the same way you saw your way in. Because I'm damn sure not about to listen to a speech." And before Regina could finish, Q picked up a folder that had been sitting on her desk and handed it to her. Regina said, "What? You gonna serve me with a cease and desist? Unlike your wife and my husband, I'm loyal." And she opened the folder. She said, "I'm not gonna spill any of you all's dirty secrets." And then Regina was speechless. In her hands were the signed and notarized divorce papers. She'd already known that LJ had signed them. His baby sister Rennie had called her and told her as much. She'd had no clue why he didn't file them with the courts himself or return them to her attorney. And when she finally pulled herself together, that's exactly what she'd asked Q. In response, he said, "I agreed to bring them to you. Your husband agreed to give me an opportunity to talk some sense into you. You asked that man for the house in North Carolina, the one in Martha's Vineyard, all of the vehicles at both locations, half of his retirement from the PD to be cashed out now, half of the money in your personal accounts and your savings. You've given him temporary custody of your 3 children. And the only thing you've left that man is our business and the Sprinter that he purchased and we all use to transport our children to school. And in your hands, you are holding paperwork that gives you all of that. I am not going to try to convince you to stay with your husband. I'm not going to tell you all of his positive attributes or remind you of all of the things that you two have survived. I'm not going to run down the list of things that he's done for you and for your mother, or even tell you about the kind of husband and father he's been. I'm just going to ask you one question, Regina. If that man knocked her back in, if they swung from every chandelier in his mother's house, what'd you say, 15 and a half years ago? If she gave him that Gluck Gluck 3000 and he sucked up like a vacuum and he told you all of that, would you stay or go? Would it matter more than everything else you know? Instead of answering Q's questions, Regina asked some of her own. She asked, so you mean to tell me that instead of just answering my damn question, he signed the divorce papers, gave them to you, and sent you here to turn the tables on me? Q said, he didn't send me here. I told you. I convinced him to let me come here. Had he said no, I would have stayed out of it. Regina asked why. Why did you want to come here? If you don't care what they did, if it has no effect on you and your marriage, why do you give a damn about what happens with ours? Q asked, do you believe that I love you, Regina? Do you believe that I am your friend? Regina said, I don't know what I believe anymore. As far as I can tell, I don't have no friends. Q asked, do you believe that I love your children and I care about what happens to them? Regina said, that's a low blow. My children will be just fine. Unlike LJ and I, they're growing up with a mother and a father who have the financial resources to provide them with everything that they need. Divorces happen. Children survive. If anything, parents staying together for the children is what does the most damage. Then Q asked, do you still love your husband? And Regina said, of course I do. I just love me more. And I refuse to be anybody's damn fool. I'm very surprised, Q, that you'd be willing to just remain in the dark after everything you went through with Amora, going 7 years without even knowing you had a son. I would think you would be hyper vigilant about anything that even looked like infidelity. Q said, only the unhealed go around looking for the sins of others. Everything done in the dark always comes to the light. I didn't have to look for proof of Amora's bad deeds. It fell in my lap, and I acted accordingly. I made some terrible decisions back then. Decisions that sent me to rehab and AA. But you already know that. One of the things that getting help taught me is that I don't control what other people do. All I control is how I respond to what they do. Relationships require trust, and I don't enter into relationships with people who I don't believe I can trust. Unless their behavior gives me reason to question their trustworthiness, I don't. And I don't allow other people's unhealed trauma to impact how I relate to the people I trust. Regina said, unhealed trauma? What unhealed trauma? LJ's been moving funny the entire time we've been together, or at least since he was recovering from being shot in North Carolina. I may have never caught him slipping, but I'm pretty damn sure that he has not been 100% faithful. Hell, I don't think any man can be. Maybe that's why you're not questioning Angela. Q chuckled and said, I won't even justify that with a response. You've just proven my point. I know about your conception, Regina, and I know that this is not about LJ and Angela. Your father was a rich, popular, married man, engaged in an extramarital affair with your mother, who was too young and too naive to know that he was taking advantage of her. When he learned that she was pregnant, his reaction wasn't what she'd expected. And in order to save her own life and yours, she left California and let that man believe that she'd gone to New York to end her pregnancy and create a new life. When in fact, she'd moved to North Carolina, given birth to you and raised you on her own. It was a struggle at a time when most women were hard-pressed to raise children without a man. She had to rely on community, remain disconnected from her own family in order to keep you safe. And despite all of your father's financial resources, you two survived on the bare minimum. You've done extremely well for yourself. You went to college, went to law school, passed the bar, your first try, became a sought-after business attorney in North Carolina. And you married a man who's touched more money than the average man will in 3 lifetimes. You have 3 beautiful, intelligent children, and you've been able to take care of your mother and make her latter years immensely better than her former. For all of that, you have the right to be proud. It's too bad that you've allowed a man you don't even know, and the decisions that he made create insecurities in you and make you suspicious of the very people who welcomed you into their lives, into their families, into their hearts. The same people who have been by your side most of your life are the very people that, with a stroke of a pen, you're willing to throw away. Not because of what you think they did, but because of what you think about what your father did. Until you face that, heal that hurt. Even with the answers that you seek, you'll never be able to let your guard down and embrace the kind of love that LJ and Angela have been trying to give you. And you'll never be able to teach or give that kind of love to your own children. Regina said, and that's where you're wrong and you've gone too far. Get the hell out. Hugh said, Regina said, I don't want to hear anymore. I don't need you to psychoanalyze me. The man that my mother allowed to fool her, to knock her up and leave her holding the bag, is not my father, and he has absolutely nothing to do with the decisions that I make in my life. I don't even think about that man. I met him one time, and that man was more focused on getting me off his property so that his wife wouldn't come out and find me on her porch than he was about finding out what kind of woman his only daughter, his only child, had become in his absence. He told me if I was there for money, I could contact his attorney and they'd put a check in the mail. He told me to never darken his doorstep again. So I didn't. I washed my hands of him, the entire situation, and went on with my damn life. I never thought about him or that day ever again. But in a matter of weeks, he's been brought up 3 times by 3 different people. If you ask me, y'all more concerned with him than I am. And as far as I'm concerned, LJ, Angela, you, and him can all go to hell, sliding down a razor blade through an alcohol river. Now get the hell out. And you can let LJ know that I'll be back in Texas tomorrow. My first stop will be the courthouse, where I'm going to file these papers. My second stop will be our house. He needs to have my children ready to go. Hugh stood up and prepared to exit Regina's hotel room. On his way out, though, he turned to her and said, you're going to regret this. You're going to regret not choosing trust, love, and your family. And by the time you do, I'm afraid it's going to be too late. Regina said, the hell I am. You know who is going to have regrets, though? LJ and Angela. They're going to regret playing with me. And you're going to regret it, too. You're going to regret not questioning your best friend and your oh-so-loyal wife. Clearly, she got you thinking she could do no wrong. But you forget that I've known her longer than you have. And I knew her before she was all saved and sanctified. As a matter of fact, she wasn't nearly as holier than thou before LJ got shot in North Carolina. If you ask me, her devotion to Christ was a result of her guilty conscience. And so was her overwhelming devotion to our friendship and the success of me and LJ's marriage. And God may have forgiven her for whatever it is she did with my husband, but I never will. Hugh just shook his head, walked out of the room, and closed the door behind himself. And as soon as he did, Regina immediately went to packing. The crazy thing is that before she walked in and found Q in her hotel room, she had already made her mind up to go back to Texas the next day. Natalia was good. She wasn't going to need her for at least a week or 2. And if she did, she'd be able to help her remotely. So she planned to go back and attempt to have a final conversation with her husband and find out why Rennie hadn't pulled up. Because when she called her, she had threatened to whoop her behind. And Regina was looking to get some stress out. But since LJ and Q decided they wanted to play this game, giving her the paperwork signed and notarized and leaving the ball in her court to get them filed, she wasn't going back home to have a come-to-Jesus conversation with her husband. She was going to give him and Angela a piece of her mind, though. And this time, it wasn't going to be done separately. She was going to confront them both together, give them a final opportunity to come clean, give LJ a final chance to save their marriage, and Angela her one and only opportunity to get her best friend back. And if they didn't take advantage of it, then they could both go fly a damn kite. She was going to spend time with her children, have a conversation with her mother about her disloyalty, and find Rennie's behind and make her stand on all her threats. The following morning, when Regina got to the family complex in Denton, Texas, she saw a U-Haul truck parked in the visitor's lot. And she wondered to herself, who the hell was moving out? Or who was moving in? She'd been completely out of the loop and out of contact with everybody. So she hadn't heard any juicy gossip, but she figured her mother would be able to clue her in. She pulled up at the gate, punched in her code, and it didn't work. When the guard in the guard gate came over the intercom asking how he could help her, Regina said, "This is Mrs. Johnson. Why is my code not working?" The guard said, "And your first name, ma'am?" She said, "Regina." The guard said, "One moment." A few moments later, the main gate opened, and when she got to the second one, there was a guard waiting there. But the gate was still closed. Frustrated, she rolled her window down and said, "What the hell is going on here?" The guard looked in her window and said, "Mrs. Johnson, you're going to need to park in the visitor's lot next to that U-Haul, and I'll escort you where you need to go." Regina said, "The hell I will. I live here." The guard said, "Ma'am, that's not for me to dispute or debate. My orders were to have you park, put you on this golf cart, and escort you to meet your husband." Realizing that there was no point in arguing with the guard, Regina did as he asked. And when she got on the golf cart and they rode through the second gate, she realized that he was driving away from her home. So she asked, "Where the hell are we going?" The guard said, "To the main house. Your husband's waiting for you there." Regina said, "Oh, brother, here we go." Fine. But Regina was pissed. She was expecting to pull up to her house, park in her regular parking space, and put her game face on. She was going to pretend like she'd seen the error of her ways, convince LJ to call Angela. Angela was going to be so excited to hear that she'd returned and changed her mind that she'd rush over, and then she'd flip the script on them both. But it looked like LJ had head her off at the pass. She was trying to imagine on the short ride to the main house what kind of surprise he could have possibly planned. She was sure that he'd probably pulled out all the stops to try to get her back. When she pulled up at the main house, though, her mother was waiting for her on the porch. When she got off the golf course, she was like, "Hey, Ma, I'm glad to see you. We need to talk. But after I speak with LJ and Angela." Mom Joy said, "No, sweetheart. Your children haven't seen you in weeks. First, you need to spend time with them. Then you need to talk with your husband. I'll be here to support you, though." Regina said, "I don't need no support. I got this." Mom Joy said, "Sure." When they headed inside, her 12-year-old son, L3, 9-year-old daughter, Angelina, and 3-year-old son, Anders, came running to embrace her, and her tough exterior cracked. She completely lost it seeing her babies. They led her to a room that the grandmother crew was using as the children's playroom during the daytime, and they peppered her with questions and commentary for nearly 2 hours. And then LJ walked in the room. He looked like he was almost fully recovered from his injury. He was walking a little slower, but he didn't have a cane, a crutch, or anything. And he was still looking as fine and as buff as ever. Regina felt the same flutters in her abdomen that she always had when her husband walked into a room. But the look on his face said that he was not having the same experience seeing his wife. He told the kids, "Go find your grandmother. Your mother will be around. She and I need to talk right now." And when the kids headed out, he looked at Regina and said, "So I understand that this is your second stop." Regina said, "No, actually, it's my first." Imagine my surprise when I pulled up at the front gate and my code didn't work. LJ said, "You don't live here no more. You don't need a code." Regina said, "The hell I don't. Our divorce is yet final, and wherever my children live, I live." LJ said, "It don't work like that. But I definitely get why you would see it that way. The last 2 decades of our lives together, you've been having it your way. For the last 2 decades, you've treated our life together like Burger King. But once I signed those papers, I was done letting you have it your way. I gave you everything you asked for. What more do you want?" Regina said, "I want to talk to you and Angela together." LJ said, "I'll pass. The courthouse closes in an hour. I'll follow you there and make sure those papers get filed." Regina said, "Fine, but let me talk to Angela first." LJ just shook his head, picked up his cell phone, and called Angela. And within a matter of moments, she was entering the room. Apparently, she was already at the main house and expecting the call. When she walked in, the first thing she said was, "Please tell me that you've changed your mind about divorcing LJ." Regina said, "No, I haven't. I came here to give you two the final opportunity to tell me the damn truth before I divorce both of you." Angela looked at LJ, looked at Regina, turned around, and walked back out of the room. Regina said, "Where the hell you going?" Angela said, "I'm not doing this. I don't have to, I don't need to, and I don't want to."